wa barak wasallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, his companions, all those who call to his way, establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of being followers of the last Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that through him was revealed the last testament. The final book to humanity was revealed. And this book gives life. And so the life of guidance, the life of revelation, the light, in a sense, of being able to understand the unseen. And it is through this guidance that Muslims have been able to revive Islam and been able to go back to their roots. And this is important because when we speak about revival, we are not speaking about a reform where people change the religion in order to meet the standards or the culture of the people. We're talking about living in the society. You are in the world, but you are not of the world. So you're living in the world, but you're not controlled by it. There's a difference between that and a person who lives in the world and just flows inside of the world. And we recognize this in one of the early hadith as Ghutha as-Sail. The Prophet designated them as the foam and the twigs on the water, which can be carried to the right, carried to the left. It has no weight. It has no roots. And because it doesn't have that foundation, then when new trends come along, when new ideas come along, they shift towards it. And that is the difference, really, because the foundations of Islam, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are alive. And they will continue to be alive right to the end of time. And so in this light, or in this stream of Islamic revival, we are looking at 40 hadiths, which are amongst the essential hadiths in the Islamic revival in the 21st century. And I say this because of having experienced these traditions popping up in different parts of the world, and also after many years in the field, recognizing that the issues facing the community in North America and Central, South America, Europe, were the same as in other parts of the world, slightly different according to the circumstance, but fundamentally the same. And so within these traditions, we recognize that Islam is not a religion in a Western sense. A religion in a Western sense is only just your religious dogma. I believe in one God, I believe in three gods, I believe in the sun, I believe in the moon. It's basically your theory about creation, about death, about existence. But a way of life is different because your idea, your aqidah, or your belief impacts your life. So it literally structures the way that you're living inside of the world. And so this is a deen, what we call deen. And after many years in the field, I was given the burden of being the imam in one of the big masjids of Canada, the Jami Mosque in Toronto, which was one of the largest in the country at the time. And I took this burden on expecting that there would be so many questions about faith, questions about fiqh, questions about Islamic sciences. And I was worried because I was not an expert really in this. I was really trained to do dawah and also have a flair for Islamic history. But after a while, I recognized that the majority of the questions and issues were not dealing with aqidah or with fiqh. There were actually social problems, psychological problems, family problems, what you could say lifestyle problems. It's lifestyle problems. That the Islamic way of life, which is rooted in certain countries and based upon the level of Islam in a country. In other words, were there scholars there? Are the people literate in Quranic understanding? Do they understand? Do they have a good basis? Do they implement it? And that's usually in the heartland of Islam, in the centers. Based upon that level, you will see differences in Islamic practice. Okay, so the people were coming here to this part of the world with different levels of practice, different types of practice, but there were similarities. And by going to the root foundation of Islam and Islamic way of life, we were able to unite ourselves, because it's the principles of Islam that unite us. It's not our culture. It's not our culture. The cultures are extremely different, but the principles are basically the same. And so, after many years in this level of leading, I dropped this and joined a group of social workers and psychiatrists and people in the field, and we opened up Islamic Social Services. And Islamic Social Services, which is used as a dawah center as well, was basically to deal with the social, economic, psychological, family problems faced by Muslims. This is the greatest issue facing us in this part of the world. And so what I recognized is that analyzing the problems of the people and trying to present an Islamic solution led to certain trends in lifestyle, certain issues in lifestyle. And it is these issues in lifestyle which are impacting us. It's eroding our Islam. And in order to revive Islam, we have to bring back the original principles in these areas. And so this is what is unique about this approach to Islamic revival, is that it is touching on certain key areas which we can benefit from as individuals. Our families can benefit from this, our communities, and even the Muslim world itself. And so in this light, we recognize that the essence of the Islamic revival is in intentions. It's the very intention of the person. And that niyyah, or that intention, starts to come out and affect the body in the form of character. So the character of the individual, in most cases, reflects their intentions. Okay, so the character now comes out, and the character is what the Prophet ﷺ said. That is really the essence of the message. So it is these qualities, it is these aspects of Islamic life, which you could call aspects of character, in a sense. So this is what we're looking at. And when you look at the different areas, you will then be able to reflect upon the onslaught of the secular upon the Muslim community's minds, and especially the minds of the children. One of these areas that we are looking at in the area of character is the area of decency and vulgarity. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh reports that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu said, "Al-haya'u min al-iman, wal-iman fil jannah, wal-bada'u min al-jafa' wal-jafa' fin nar." He said, decency comes from belief, and belief leads to paradise. And vulgarity comes from crudeness, and crudeness leads to hellfire. So here, the focus is on al-haya. And al-haya, it is being described that it is part of faith. And haya is described as modesty, keeping the limits, shyness, people use this word haya in different ways. But I think that the idea of keeping limits, knowing your limits, because haya is not supposed to be weakness. So generally people connect modesty and humility and shyness with weakness. In the Western countries especially, and it's all over the world now, the strong guy is the strong man. Now it's the strong woman. And in most of the movies now, the women are beating the men. So now it's the superwoman, it's the superman, right? It's that, a powerful person who kicks sand in your face, who doesn't care, out of control, right? That is supposed to be strength. Okay, and the person who is modest, the person who is shy, is looked upon as weak. And this was a problem for Muslims who were coming into Canada and America when they were applying for jobs. Because in many of our countries, we are taught to show respect to leadership. So the child, and even the teenager, shows respect to their parents. In some cultures, they kiss the parent's hand. Right? They do not stare in their father's face or their mother's face. They do not shout back at them, even though they might differ with them. On the job as well, you respect your leader. So if the person is your Amir, or the person is your director, or executive, you have respect for that person. And you show it in a sense, by humbling yourself to the person, because that person's in leadership. But the way people are taught today is that, and they're looking at you, when you look me in the eyes, talk. You have to talk. They even make athletes, basketball players and football players and hockey players who are not good speakers. They are gladiators. It's like a Roman gladiator, right? So now you're making a gladiator take an interview. So after the game, they expect all the players, some of them who cannot talk, they're about physical things, but you have to have a personality now. And you have to look in the camera, and you have to talk, you see? And this was the same for the First Nations people, because the native people of these lands also are very modest and shy. Within the culture, they are very modest, and they don't talk a lot. And that is a description of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that he was the kind of person, you'd be with that person, and he's listening to you all the time. And then every once in a while he'll say something important, right? And then listen, and if you don't say anything, there would be silence. And to be silence for a period of time. Now if you try that with somebody here in Canada today, especially the young people, after about 10 seconds, they get nervous. So you got to talk about something, even if it's about a bird flying by or anything. But the chat must continue. And even now in social media, everywhere they have chat rooms, because you must chat. You see, so it's talking all the time. And it's the opposite of modesty. And again, modesty is really the essence of modesty, why a person is shy and modest. And this is a crucial point. It's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not because you're afraid of the person. Difference between the two. So you are modest with another person because of Allah. The man is modest with a woman. He looks down. He's not staring at her eyes, and he's not looking her up and down. The woman is also modest, with men, not because they're afraid, but because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the haya is for Allah. And that really is a noble quality. And one of the best examples of this true modesty was one of the great companions, Sahabi Jalil. His name was Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anh. And Abu Ubaidah was described, and you get a chance, read about his life, if you get any books on the companions. He accepted Islam one day after Abu Bakr. That's how close. Remember, Abu Bakr was early, right? But nobody realizes that Abu Ubaidah accepted Islam the next day. right? And Abu Bakr's doing dawah. Next day he came in. So he's early companion. And he is described as kathir al-haya. He was extremely modest. He would not even look you in the eye. He was like, when you're around him, you know, he's like really soft and kind, you know, kind of person, and extremely modest kind of, this is how his personality was. But at the same time, when danger came, he is described as the sharp side of the sword. That's how they describe him. So he's a highly modest person, but when danger comes, he turns into a lion. You see this now? Now, you don't normally get this connection. The shy one is the little sheep, right? And the lion roars and scares everybody. But this quality, and it is one of the beautiful qualities of a Muslim, is to be modest but strong, right? You are shy at the right points. You are shy from things which is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those things where your courage is required, you go forward. There's a big difference between the two. And we find today, as the second part of the hadith is saying, that vulgarity, and that is swearing, insulting, you know, being a roughneck, as they say, a thug, a tough guy, right? That makes you like a crude, low person. So you become like, you know, really, you know, rough and ignorant kind of person, and that leads to hellfire. This is the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What we see now is an onslaught on modesty. It is an onslaught. And the onslaught comes in different ways. Number one, it was coming in fashions. The fashion, how people dress. And if you can Google, I don't know whether it will come up, but there's so much on the internet now, but if you say bathing suits in 1920, okay? Bathing suit in even 1930. And you look at the bathing suits, and you will find that the women had on almost like a dress. They were covered. And the men also were basically, you know, were covered to a great extent. Okay, and it wasn't until the 50s and then 60s now, that's when it really started changing, that, you know, the haya was under attack. And the bathing suits became more tight and immodest. And even the next area, which is when the television came. Because the television now is visual images. And that starts impacting on how people think about themselves. And the early television programs, I remember when I was very young, growing up in America, there was a television program called I Love Lucy. So this is a very old program from way back, right? And in I Love Lucy, Lucy and her husband could not be seen going to bed together in the same room. It was against the rules of Hollywood at the time, modesty rules, for a man and woman on a television screen to go inside of a bedroom together. Okay? And if they did, if you did see them resting, they're resting in different places. Now look at the difference of what you see on television. Right? Especially in the 60s with the sexual revolution, especially when they developed birth control pills, right? And there was this British model, Twiggy, you know, and then they developed spandex, which is that material that sticks to your body, right? The tights now, right? Spandex. And that spandex, what it does is exactly as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was saying, that the day would come when people would be naked, would be clothed, but naked. They have clothes on, but they're naked. What does that mean? If you look at somebody with the spandex tights on, it literally describes the whole of the body, yet it's a covering. You see? So when these things came in, modesty seriously under attack. And then birth control pills. And then it continues and continues and continues. And in the movies and the television programs that people watch, they have a thing that is called erotica. And erotica comes from the Greek word eros. And eros was, the Romans call him Cupid. And Cupid was supposedly the messenger boy for the goddess of love, who was Aphrodite for the Greeks and Venus for the Romans. And Cupid's mission was to get people in love. He would fly around in the Greek-Roman mythology. He shoots you with an arrow, and then you fall in love. And we just went through Valentine's Day. This is like 2 weeks ago, right? It was Valentine's, the 14th or so. So we went through this. That's what's left, and it's still here now. It's rising back. And as Muslims, given Valentine's. Right? So everybody's is rising, right? What is erotica? Erotica, and we speak straightforward about this. Erotica is the concept of sexuality and physicality in relationships, especially of male and female. And how erotica plays itself out. If you look at the art of the ancient Egyptians, I saw this, I was comparing ancient Egyptian art, those are the Nubians who built the pyramids, and Greek art. And the Egyptians, whenever they drew a person, they had this long arms, and the features were not described. Okay, but when the Greeks did it, they tried to describe the human body. And they took great pleasure in doing sculptures and everything for the human body. This is erotica. So how it played itself out in Hollywood, in our visual educations, is that when the movies are being shown, and this has a big impact on our family. And again, this is part of the Islamic revival. We have to face this, because this is how we're being attacked. When the movies are being shown, in almost every movie, there is some form of love. That's how the movies go. If there's no love or violence in a movie, they don't want to watch it. Okay, sometimes the level of love or violence or the complexity of it will determine who gets the Oscar award, or whatever it is. Okay? And perversion is now involved, also in this thing as well. So they're out in space fighting aliens. They're on a spaceship fighting aliens. And somebody amongst the 12 people on the ship is going to fall in love. They're under the ocean fighting against a huge whale. And somebody, usually the leading character, is going to fall in love. They're playing baseball or they're playing hockey. Watch all the movies. Somebody's going to fall in love. Why in every movie somebody has to fall in love? Erotica. You see? So when your mind is concerned with this, with sexuality, then you're easy to be pushed into it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us very clearly, وَلَا تَقْرَبُ الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. And do not come close to adultery. It is an abomination. It will ruin everything. So Allah didn't say, do not commit adultery. He said, don't come close to it. You see? So erotica now, the images that we are being given, the clothing that we are wearing, and now even men's clothing now is so tight now, the men have to pull their pants, and you see that it's this spandex clothes, right? That's how they make a men's suit look like it's 1 or 2 sizes too small, right? So it is all leading toward physicality, you see, which is the Greek-Roman erotica concept, which breaks down haya. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said in one tradition, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. If you do not have haya, if you do not have modesty, then do what you want to do. In other words, if you don't have modesty, you're capable of doing anything. So that's one of the first things they got to break down. If they break down your modesty, if your limits are broken down, there's no limits now in between male and female, between people in a job, society, no more limits, no respect, right? Then you can do anything. And that is one of the worst aspects of drinking alcohol. Drugs to a certain extent also. But the drinking of alcohol, one of the first things that it does is that it kills or destroys your sense of modesty. So the person is now maybe a fairly shy person. And many of us have seen this who worked on jobs with people who drink. I was in the University of Toronto studying, for a PhD, and they had this thing called wine and cheese party, right? And all the PhD, you must go to the party. Okay, it's part of the whole process, or your professor is going to hate you, right? So I attended the party. I came in the beginning, just people standing around talking, right? They're talking about their papers and whatever. Then I look, they're breaking out wine. Okay? Soon as they start drinking the wine, they change. They change. And as soon as that breaks out and that comes, I say, please excuse me. I showed my face, I leave. Right? As soon as I see that wine. Because what will happen is, you'll see a person who is normally shy, and then they start getting drunk, and they're all up in your face. Right? You've seen that before, right? They're up in your face talking, and they're saying to you things they would never say before. What is gone? Haya. You see? The limits. The limits are now gone. Even a girl who normally would not be talking to men is now drunk and sometimes in the middle of the floor, dancing. Totally embarrassing themselves. And some of these other drugs that they've got have even go further. So haya is a very important point. Is very crucial for us, in our struggle. And young people have to recognize that being modest, right, dressing modest, lowering your gaze, whatever, this is nobility. This is not weakness. And the first example comes from the parents and from people in the community, but also in our teachings as well. And so once they have that strength and they understand that if they're modest, they're actually doing something good. They're doing something, which is closer to the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. It is a noble thing that they're actually doing. Okay? And you will see that when, generally speaking, when people become nobles, if a person's going to be a queen or a princess, she goes to charm school. If he's going to be a prince, they'll send you to a type of etiquette training school. Sometimes it will come in the boys' schools that you go to, private schools, and they're teaching you how to wear your clothing, how to sit, and you see a lot of their actions is that they know limits, right? They're taught limits. Whereas in the lower schools, they're not teaching you those things. And that's the difference between what they call here upper class and lower class. That's one of the differences, because the basis is money. But one of the differences is that the lower class people don't have adab. They don't have etiquettes. You see? They don't have training. And this is what Islam actually gives. It is giving us etiquettes. It is giving us training. Really, it is giving us nobility. That is what it is, nobility. And I have seen in Arabia, desert Bedouins who don't have hardly anything on, but they're really noble people. Like their character and how they treat you and how they talk, they're noble. But if you look at them, they don't have anything. You see, because the character, right? And that is what is under attack, and that is what we need to recognize in the Islamic revival. I want to open up the floor for any immediate questions. These are different areas. Each one of these areas is a whole workshop. It could be a whole evening just on this alone. This is a big area. Okay, any immediate questions? Yeah.
You mentioned 3 areas, right? On slot on modesty. One is dress, one is TV, and the third one?
There is dress, right? There is television, And I said there was 3?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole...
Birth control one of it?
Yeah, I mean, we said that there was the birth control pills, right? That was part of the whole onslaught on modesty, as when birth control came in. A lot of people changed because pregnancy was part of the limits. I mean, really, the religion is supposed to be the thing that keeps you away from it. But the fear of the girls getting pregnant stopped a lot of them from going out and having relationships because they were afraid of getting pregnant. Okay, but when that was taken away, serious problems came. Now, any other general questions that anybody has?
Yeah, also there's places you can go today, and then there's people in body paint, and they're walking the streets.
That's right. That's right.
The first time I witnessed was at Times Square, like we ran away. The whole family just break up and run away. You go to Times Square and you think, okay, you're just in a public place walking, and the thing you whoa,
Yeah.
the experience there is unbelievable. Also the one on drinking, one other thing about drinking, whereas before we were talking about hands, it encouraged you to be in groups, a mixed group.
That's right. That's right.
So where you grow up your family and okay, you're trying to, no, this drinking thing, it breaks all that up.
Yeah, and because the idea of erotica is planted in our heads, right? It's planted by the movies, it's planted by stories and different things. The nafs, your lower side, once the limit's gone, the lower side moves toward that fast. If the limits are there, it controls your lower side. That's what we call nafs al-lawwama. The nafs al-lawwama is the good side of you, that gives you good advice. The nafs al-amara bisu is the one that commands you for evil. The limits hold down the nafs al-amara. But when the limits are gone, it's wide open. That's why the alcohol scourge, right, along with erotica, it is destroying the society. And then they took it to another stage and they put millions of dollars in pornography. Now this is now one of the most dangerous levels. And it comes back to haya, because the whole concept of pornography is that it breaks down your limits. Because the things that you will see within the space of 5 minutes is something that, that in the past, young people would never see unless they were married. And even when you're married, they didn't do some of them things. The point is, so they're never exposed to it. But now they're on their cell phone, there it is. So their limits are now being shattered, right? And the haya is broken. And once your haya is gone, as the Prophet said, you're capable of anything. You can lie, you can steal, you can commit murder. You're capable of anything because you don't have any limits anymore. In other words, your taqwa, right? Your fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being broken down. And that is the struggle of the shaitan, wa iyadhu billah, and the forces of evil. It is to break down the modesty within the people. Any other general questions anybody has?
Yeah. The example of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he talks only when required or he stay quiet. But nowadays the new generation is growing up with a very different concept.
That's right.
They keep talking all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Non-stop.
Non-stop.
And it's like, and this is a problem. Because if a person is constantly talking, that means they're not listening.
They are not listening.
And if you don't listen, you're not learning. So when the person's teaching them something or saying something, they say, yeah. Right? That's just what they do. Yeah. As soon as you see somebody talking, they say, yeah. They're not listening to you, man. And if you get into an argument or debate, they don't listen to your point. They just wait for you to breathe, and then they talk.
Yeah. They're waiting where you stop and
Then they talk. They did not listen to your point. And this is a major problem because the person cannot learn, the person cannot correct themselves, right? And they're easily bombarded by evil, right? So all of this comes out of this haya. This is a big area. And it's something that Muslims need to develop. And it's a struggle too because many times in many Muslim countries, they connected haya with long clothes, like in Arabia, a black abaya. If you don't have a black abaya on, you're not modest. And before, when I lived in Medina in 1973. Okay? And I brought my family there in 74. And in 74, living in the Bedouin section, they wore black abaya and 3 levels of cloth on the face. 3 over the face. And gloves, and it down on the ground, dragging on the ground. Okay? And so their whole struggle was, their whole thing about being a Muslim was wearing that abaya. Even sometime my wife would go with the women, and some of the women, I'm not saying all of them, but some of the women, she got up for salat, and some of them were, laughing while she's making salat. Right? And she reckoned that they don't even pray, but they wear their layers. And I'll never forget, there was one girl in our area. She was a known girl. And she would walk from one section of the Harra Gharabiya, the western section, where Bedouins live. She'd walk by, and all the men, or anyone around, the weak ones would be looking. Right? And I'm coming from out of the west. And one day she's walking by. It's a woman in a complete abaya. But she has bangles on. And the bangles make noise. And then she has some nice perfume. So the perfume carried a smell. So when she comes by, you hear this nice sound, and there's this nice smell, and the rest is in your nafs fantasy. So they would fantasize about a woman in a complete tent, totally covered. And she, by doing that, was immodest. She's an immodest person. And there are some women in the West who could have a dress on, right, and nothing on their head, and they're more modest than her. Because they're trying to stay away from such, they're not trying to beautify themselves like that and do that, because modesty is not just physically, it's mental too. It's your character and your actions. So this was a shock for me. But this is where we need to have a balance in our clothing, right? That Muslim girls could wear Islamic clothing, but yet they don't feel totally out of place here in Canada. Okay? The Muslim man can distinguish himself, and he doesn't feel totally out of place. You have modesty. You learn how to dress, in a modest way. Any other questions anybody has? Floor is open.
Just one observation.
Yeah.
Just about the reprogramming and programming of our young minds in the schools is a problem. And as Muslims, we have big responsibility how we deprogram our children when they get home. In light of what they've been looking at for the last 7 hours.
That's right.
You have just half an hour before dinner or after dinner to reprogram your children. This is a big problem.
This is why people have to invest, in their children. They have to spend time, and they have to invest, whether it is traveling, whether it is whatever, providing camping or, whatever. They have to invest so that some quality time is spent by them around Muslims and not underneath this society. Okay? And I can remember, and these cell phone, this is a serious issue. And I remember traveling 2 years ago. We had a special trip that we organized, to Spain, and it was also to deal with counseling as well. So we had a lot of young people, and we were walking in the woods in Spain, and the psychotherapist, sister, Miriam is her name, so she said, you give them a little talk or whatever. She said, okay, now for the next half a mile, I want everybody to turn off your cell phones. Right? Don't use your cell phone at all. Okay? Now that's a shock, because everybody now wants to capture everything. The selfie. And the selfie is a selfish way of putting yourself in everything. It's not a beautiful mountain. It's now you and the mountain. You see what you're doing? You captured the mountain. Right? That's selfishness. So she said, no cell phone. And then after a while she said, silence. Nobody talk. Because as we're walking through and there's no cell phone, they're chatting, man. The animals are all running, right? All this noise coming, right? Then we said, no sound. for the next 10 minutes. And we're walking. Okay? And after we walked for 10 minutes in the woods, hiking, we came to a clearing, formed a circle, and then we said, now, what was your experience? And their experience was, for the first time, I heard the birds. I heard birds. I actually could hear the wind. You know, the beauty of this mountain. They were seeing things that they couldn't see when they're involved with chatting or with their phones. You see? So this is an issue. That is what they need to, to be away from all these things, and then learn some, very serious lessons, that is there. So this leads us on to the next area, and this is also connected to the hayat to a certain extent, and it goes further, and that is the concept of the two-faced one. Now, part of the problem I faced as a counselor, dealing with the Muslim community and the trends in the community, was the younger generation looking at their parents, right, and then having to cope with society itself. And when parents came in, when Muslims came in large numbers in the 50s and the 60s, Muslims were a minority in this part of the world. I remember even in 1970, if you saw a Muslim across the street, you're like waving to the person. Like it's amazing to see a Muslim, right? And so it was a lot of pressure. So, and the world politics is there, and whatever. So people would then change their identities, or at least they would hide their identity. So the man would get a job and he would say, you don't have to call me Muhammad, call me Mo. Or he puts on his thing, Mo Dabbit. That's his name. So instead of saying Ali, he said Al. Now, Muhammad Ali Clay, the boxer, he made Muhammad and Ali very famous, right? So that was a nice name to have. But Ali by itself, right? Or, Bilal, right? He said, no, you guys can call me Billy. And why is it that they have a problem pronouncing Arabic names, right? When they have Greek names, and they have Romanian names and Russian names, which are difficult to pronounce. So why is Arabic a difficult thing to pronounce? Psychological, right? And part of our problem was we were so shy and weak that we submerged the name. And, it was a strategic move. I don't blame anybody. They had to survive. They had to get a job. So we took on the identity. And then when we came home, we became the Sultan when we came in the door of the house. Now I want my roti. I want this, everything must be in order, I'm back home. So now he's the king, right? But when he's outside, he's Mo, right? And he's a different kind of guy. So the children are watching this. And, okay, two faces, whatever. They now have to go to school. How do they function in school? They're under a lot of pressure. So they will also have two faces. So Bilal, when he's in the house, or when he's in the masjid with you, very polite boy. But when he goes to school, he becomes a gangster. So Bilal becomes Billy. And sometimes he has to become a gangster to survive, especially in some of these public schools. And unfortunately, some of our so-called Islamic schools too. They have fighting and a lot of things go on too. You got to be, it's peer pressure, which we're going to cover in another session. The point we're looking at now is the two faces. Now, the problem people face is that they're used to seeing Bilal in the house, Bilal in the masjid, Bilal driving and walking. They don't know about Billy. And one day, that young boy is now growing up. And people in many Muslim countries tend to be, a certain height, unless you come from a certain part of the world. But say you're about 5'7", 5'5", 5'7", right? Now, their children are drinking milk and eating chicken, which has steroids in it. So the children will be like a foot big, they'll be giant, 6 feet. And now they're looking down on you. So that little boy that you brought here, or maybe you had the baby and you say, after 7 years, we're going to make some money, and we're going to go back home and build a house and a villa, and finished. Didn't work like that. Fighting broke out in your country. You were just able to make enough money to survive. Right? So therefore you're stuck, and you turn around, and now standing in front of you is not Bilal, it's Billy. And you say, Billy, we got to make salat. And he said, why? Now, can you answer if he said why to you? In most Muslim countries, why is not in your vocabulary, man. You don't say, in Pakistan, why? You're going to say, why you make salat? You murtad, right? You're an apostate, right? That is not in the vocabulary of people, man. Does not exist. But here, that's the struggle. He should know why. He should be able to say it's going to protect you in the Salat tanha al-fasha wal munkar. It'll protect you from evil and corruption. What's the benefit of Salat? Explain it to him. Also, we need to explain and institute on the level of the parents and the children the issue of two faces. This takes us to hadith number 13. And again, this is an issue that I've faced. All of these issues, I've faced these things in communities. Over and over again in counseling. And traveling to different countries and seeing it again. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, Tajidu min shirar al-nas yawm al-qiyamah inda Allah dal wajhain alladhi ya'ti ha'ula'i biwajhin wa ha'ula'i biwajh. You will find the worst among the people on the day of resurrection is the two-faced one. He comes to some people with one face and another people with a different face. See? Now it's one thing if you have role playing. If you're going to go to an office and work in an office, then you learn office procedure. You will work in an office, you will wear your suit, you will act a certain way, and you have to function like that. Okay? If you're going to do construction, you will learn construction procedure. You will wear your hard hat, you will learn safety when you're in a structure where things can fall and people can be hurt with equipment and whatever. You will learn your procedures. So you can't go to the construction with a three-piece suit on and cross your legs. Because they'll look at you, are you the boss or something? Like, what are you, you're working construction in a three-piece suit. Right? So you got to role play. You go to construction and you put on your boots and you put on your tough, pants and shirt and whatever, you're ready for construction. Because it's going to be a rough environment. That's okay. But that doesn't mean that when the time comes for salat, because you're in construction, that you can't pray. You should still be making your salat. You should still be eating halal food, right? Because the people are on the job, seeing girls go by, construction workers are famous for this, and whistling at them, right? You don't have to whistle at them to make them laugh, right? Go away from them. They like to swear and say bad words. You don't have to say bad words. You see? So that's the difference. The problem is when the face becomes the personality. Okay? That's a hypocrite. That's a two-faced one. And look what the hadith is saying. Okay? It'll be the worst amongst the people in the day of resurrection, in the sight of Allah. Is somebody like this, man, who's got these two faces. So this is an issue that we have to go into. And I'm not saying schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a psychological disease, right? Where the person has dual personalities, right? That's medical thing. I'm talking about in character-wise. And when the role playing becomes personality, this Bilal came home and suddenly he turns into Billy and something happens, he stubbed his toe and he swears in his house, and his mother never heard him swear like that. And she said, "What is this? What's going on with you?" And he turned around and realized that he couldn't switch off Billy. You see it? He couldn't switch off Billy and become Bilal. So how do we solve this? And that is that we learn wisdom, how to manage the society, to be in the society. You're a construction worker, you're an office person, you're a student, but you're not controlled by the society. Right? So your principles are there. And you tell yourself, I'm going to make Salatul Dhuhr here, I'm going to make Asr here, right? For my lunch, I'm going to carry a halal lunch, or I know a halal shop. You plan it out. You plan out your day. You organize yourself with that particular job. And when the children see this, it will reflect on them at school. So then they will say also, alhamdulillah, this happened in many schools from the 80s and 90s, that the students even organized a musalla for their prayer in the schools. Because in many cases they couldn't leave the school to come to masjids. So they organized musallas, and even in some cases when it's far away from a masjid and they can't get out, a Jumu'ah prayer. And I used to go to the schools and actually train some people in making the Jumu'ah and work with a counselor, teacher, getting permission from the school and setting up a place and even doing a Jumu'ah khutbah to show them how it goes, and then empowering them, and then they would do it and then continue. And now, alhamdulillah, this has helped them. It has helped a lot. But it's only part of the issue, right? It's a deep issue, that covers all aspects of life, but it starts with a mentality, right? That I have one face for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? I use my wisdom in situations, but my face is for Allah. I'm a Muslim, and I'm not going to be ashamed to be a Muslim. Okay, so this is the issue of the two-faced one. This is a big one. This is a big one. Any questions anybody has? Floor is open for this issue of the two faces. And we face this in many cultures. In some countries, they might say his name is Abdul, but just call him Johnny, right? It depends upon the influence of the other people on you. Okay? If it's on you, you have a problem. And probably the worst form that ever existed of this is in Spain. And that is because the Inquisition, when the Catholics took over, they were forcing people to be Catholic. And they would do that by questioning you. They take you to an inquisitor, and if you fail the test, they'll burn you at the stake. So Jewish people and Muslim people and Christians who believed in one God, they would burn them alive. So some people couldn't take it. Okay, so they say, okay, I'll accept the Trinity. Inside, they were Muslim. They call Morescos. The name is called Moresco. The Jewish people is called Morenos. Moreno is a Jewish person who is Christian on the outside and Jewish on the inside. And it's deep because when you know these names, you hear certain things. And I think it was Colombia or whatever, one of the big officials, Moreno is his name. It's okay, Moreno, right? So that's where it is. So they keep some of these names. But that was the concept. You see, the concept was that they were trying to get this out of you. And they instituted eating pork and drinking wine in every meal in the Spanish diet. And in some shops, and you'll see it when you go there, you go by a shop and you see a side of pork hanging in the shop. And sometimes they're not even selling meat. But now today they have a plastic one. But the way it was is that you had to show that you were a good Trinitarian. You hang your pork in the shop. So you're definitely not Muslim. You're hanging your pork. Okay? And that was the worst form where people had to hide their identities, and they really had to. It was life or death. It was life or death, right? But in today, with Muslims so scattered around the world, and in some countries we have, like here, we have rights. If we stand for our rights, you don't have to be a two-faced person. We tell ourselves sometimes, that we can't do this and we can't do that. Right? Okay, floor is open for any questions. Anybody has?
These titles, the Spanish people, they themselves call them like that, or this was their own?
Yeah, I mean, the Spanish sort of call them this Morescos, like.
So they
started
knew
coming.
they were Muslims?
And then it became a name amongst them, but it was whole communities of people, Moresco communities. So these would be people who are from an Islamic background, but they are Christians. Because if you weren't a Christian, they're going to kill you, and you got to run. Okay, so you had Moresco communities, Moreno communities. That's what in Toledo. If you go to Toledo, you'll see Morenos communities, and some of their synagogues that were hidden. So you'll find whole communities that were like that. Then the next level of Inquisition, and this is not our topic, is that they even purged the Morescos, the ones who said they were Christian. They went into them, and they said, no Moresco woman can be a midwife. Right? No Moresco man can deal with slaughtering of meat or anything. They want to take halal out of you completely. If you took a bath on Thursday night as a Christian, you might get burnt alive. Why? Does anybody know why?
For Friday, for Jummah.
Jummah, because Jummah starts on Thursday night, right? Laylatul Jummah. So you're a Christian, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Drinking wine, but you took a bath. There's a little Islam left in you. And they want to take it out. You see? So that creates this schizophrenia, dual personality they had to do. And we have different versions of this personality. Now.
So they knew more about Islam.
So they were losing their Islam.
No, I mean, the Spaniards knew more about Islam, so they were going after all these things. So they knew Islamic.
Oh yeah, I mean, what they did was, Muslims ruled for 781 years. And so they would take back a section, right, from the north. So the Trinitarians would come down, say they were able to. There was a corrupt emir, and they would take his section, and many times, unfortunately, they would work with another emir against him. So knowing that the two Muslims are fighting each other, they say, okay, well, let's get him. He hates you. And they send him. And so then they both fight him, right? And when they defeat that Muslim, then he kills the other one. And he gets 2 provinces. So when he takes over the province, he is learning, Muslim culture is almost 60 to 70% of Spanish culture, up until today. If you look at Spanish culture, paella is their main meal, their famous meal, paella. And paella is like what we used to do, when you take all your leftovers and everything, and some rice and spice, and you put it all together, right? And then it's a nice meal. And this was baqiya. Baqi means what's left over, Arabic. Baqiya. So they say paella now. Because the Muslims, when you have all your leftovers, and we all have this in our cultures, right? And you want to make your leftovers taste good, right? So you get a little rice, some spice, and whatever, and put all the leftovers together, and you make this this nice meal, right? This is paella. This is a national dish now. Don Quixote, the famous poet of Don Quixote, if you look close, he was actually a Muslim. The 2 leading attractions in Spain today is in Granada and in Cordoba. And you will see in the structures of their house, you will see in their lifestyle, it's still there. So they were learning culture from us. So they knew us very well. But they would take the culture and add a little pork to it, put a cross or a little devil on the top of it. They would change it around a little bit. But they knew who we were because their culture was fundamentally coming from us. They had a very weak culture, at the time. And Muslims were there. 781 years is a long time, man. How old is Canada? They just celebrated 150 years, right? In Granada, that province, 781 years. That's a long time to be ruling a place, okay? So this is where, this way of wisdom, that they can even look at a suit. Like in the Jami Mosque, we even had fashion shows for men. Because brothers are trying to figure out, how can I be Muslim and work in an office? It's okay, make a nice Nehru thing, matching pants, in a suit style, and you will stand out. People will look at you and say, whoa, that's not, but it meets the fashion standard of an office, right? Wear a round neck, on your shirt instead of wearing a tie, right? You see the Iranian diplomats do that, right? They wear a round neck, but they don't wear ties, okay? So this is a way of, keeping the so-called standards. But yet when they look at you, they say, that's different. He's one of us, he's here, but he's a little different. What's different? That's where you're distinguishing yourself. And a Muslim is supposed to distinguish himself, not just the sister wearing hijab, but even the male should be distinguishing himself as well. Now, any questions anybody has on this two-faced concept?
I'm thinking about this two-face within the family, because if you're trying to break down Islam, one is to attack the family. Now, us coming in the West here, and then the male is working, the female is working, everybody's getting their independence, and everybody kind of have their own life.
Yeah.
How much this is creeping within the Islamic home, looking at divorce on the rise.
That's right.
In this part of the world. And I'm thinking how much this, like, when you're saying Allah will think, so I mean, within the home, should we be worrying about this too?
We have to be worried. And again, like I say, I traveled to many places. And when I was in Malaysia, no, it was actually, Singapore. In Singapore, the Muslims who were 90% Malay, they were having serious problem with their youth. And that is because Singapore, there's so much pressure on people. It's like the model of the New World Order. They wanted to make a state that is the ultimate state of control of its population. So Singapore is a highly controlled place. You can't spit, you can't chew gum publicly. Everything is by rules, and it's very expensive. You get good benefits, by the way, but you got to work. So most families, father and mother both worked. And the children would come home from school, and they would be by themselves. And a lot of social problems developed. And they even started calling the Muslim children latchkey children. That was the name, because they have the key to the house, right? So they're called latchkey children. So when they come home, and you got that 2-3 hours before anybody else is coming back, sometimes more. A lot of drugs came in, and a lot of things were crept in. It was a way that corruption could, creep in because the parents weren't around to defend, the family, from these things. So this is a very serious issue. This is why one thing I used to notice about the Jewish children in a place where when I went to school when I was young, and there was some Jewish students in our school, and so after school, we'd be walking home, and the Jewish kids would go that way. We go back to the housing projects. We live in the ghetto, right? So we go back, and we're going to play some basketball or whatever. But the Jewish kids, where you going? Hebrew school. Okay? So after school, they're going to Hebrew school in order to keep busy. And as a teacher, they are paid by the community. They'll learn Hebrew language. They'll learn values of their religion, right? And they keep out of trouble. And they stay there until their parents come home. So they organized it in their community. And we used to do that more here. Before we had our regular schools, we used to have afternoon Quran classes and stuff, where everybody would send their kids after school. You get a Quran and whatever, and you go to the masjid, and you have Quran class. And what that was serving, the purpose that served was, it's also a place where they could go, and they could be learn etiquettes and be under the protection of the community. So it is part of what you could call the need for Muslim community centers, and also what they call scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, where you have activities in the afternoon. They go to the scouting activities. They might go home from school and go to a scouting activity. But that time in the afternoon, it is very serious. So these are the issues that we face, in dealing with the personalities of Muslims. Now the last part in this section because we're dealing with the issues of character and the extremes, that people were on. And in this tradition, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the best example, this one is called balance in religion. And there's a narrative in this. I'll go through the narrative part to the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what it is saying is, Anas reported, 3 groups came to the homes of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking about his worship. So they wanted to know, how did he pray, how did he fast, because they want to know more about the Sunnah. When they were informed, they appeared to belittle what was being said. Now these are new Muslims who haven't been acculturated. They want to learn Islam real fast. And you find many times people are like that. Okay? They didn't get the character fully. But they appeared to belittle it. And they said, how can we compare ourselves to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? All of the sins he has committed in the past and the future have been forgiven. And one of them said, he wants to show what he does. Okay? And he said, as for me, I pray all night and I rest in the morning. Okay? So he's saying every night he's going to pray and he's going to rest in the morning. Okay? And then
Rest of the family, rest of the life.
yeah, he said, another one said, I will fast for an eternity and I will never break it. وَأَنَا أَصُومَ الدَّهَرَ وَلَا أُفْتِرُ. No iftar. I will fast for an eternity. Okay? Every day he's going to make, of course you can't fast without eating food. What he means here is that every day he's going to fast. Okay? So it's not just 30 days of Ramadan. Every day. See, they're showing off now about, where they're at. Okay? And the next one said, I will avoid women and I'll never get married. Right? So I'll solve the problem of, sexuality and everything. I'm just not going to get married. Never. And I will avoid women 100%. It's like a monk in a monastery, right? Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ arrived and he said, are you the ones who said this and that? Right? Now he's questioning them. And then he said, Amma wallahi inni la akhshakum lillahi wa atqakum lahu walakinni asumu wa uftir wa usalli wa arkud wa tazawwaj an-nisa faman raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. Those words you hear at marriages, right? Yeah. Right? It's part of the formula, right? And so what he's saying here, he said that by Allah, I fear Allah more than you, and I am more conscious of Allah than you. Right? And they admit that. He said, but I fast and I break my fast. I pray and I sleep. Right? And I marry women. So whoever turns away from my sunnah has nothing to do with me. Now this was a harsh rebuke that he made, for these people. Because they thought that, by the fact that they, were doing these things, that they were actually higher level Muslims. And this is what you find many times. People think they're high level, Muslims because they're like literally on extremes. Okay? But the Prophet ﷺ is showing balance. Balance. And that's that one concept. Not one extreme or another extreme. It's a balanced, approach that, the person says. One time the Prophet ﷺ came to a masjid similar to this, and he looked in, and the man was there. And the man said, so he said, why are you doing? He said, no, I read Quran all the time. I fast. I'm praying all the time. Like he's bragging, right? So then he said, okay, are you married? The man said, yes. He said, who takes care of your family? He said, oh, that's my brother. Like my brother gives for my family and for his family. The Prophet ﷺ said, your brother's a better Muslim than you. You see this? This person's fasting all the time, praying in the mosque, reading Quran. But the brother is taking the fard. He's dealing with the compulsory part. He's taking the weight, qawwam, right? Taking care of the wife. So he said he is actually a better Muslim than you. So that shows that a lot of these things that people are doing, giant turbans, clothing, all the kind of extra thing, all these nafilah and whatever, all these things that they're doing, isn't necessarily a sign of the highness of their deen. No. It may be the opposite. It may be that they're actually showing off, in their religion, instead of being a balanced person like they should be. Okay? So this is the last part, dealing with character. I want to open the floor for any questions. This is the balance, right? And this requires wisdom, putting things in the proper place. The more Islam we understand, the more Sunnah we live, it develops a way of Islamic thinking. So therefore you can make decisions Islamically in new situations. Because we might run across some things, especially when you travel. So traveling as wisdom. Because when you travel, you're out of your comfort zone. And you'll run across things that are new, and you got to make a decision, right? And you got to make a decision on your feet. Islamically, what am I going to do? We're going to have a problem with our prayer. How are we going to make salat? Where are we going to eat? You got to now make decisions.
Lots of accommodation.
Right. So and this is where the wisdom comes in. And this is a very important part of our revival, because one of the things that's ripping our community apart is extremism. It's extremism. Some people are all dunya, they're all secular, and their religion is weak. Some people, they go extreme in religion, and they have no sense of what's happening in the world. They're useless in the world. The balance is you understand your religion and you function in the world. That's what we're looking for in the revival. We're not looking for extremes. And this is a very important point to learn, because many times, young people especially, they think if they're not extreme, they're not a good Muslim. Even sometimes you'll have a young girl who wants to come to the mosque, but she doesn't wear a full hijab. Sometimes they won't even wear hijab, right? Or they'll come to the mosque and put it on, right? Let her come to the masjid. Because by being in the masjid around other people who wear it all the time, then she'll be more comfortable with the wearing of the hijab, right? But the 100%ers, I call them, must 100%. If that person does that, don't let him in, or else they ostracize them with words and actions, and they make them feel uncomfortable, right? It's a mistake. It's a mistake, because all of us have had high points in our life and low points. Everybody has it. Nobody's 100%. Now, any other general questions anybody has about this?
I think the parents' responsibility to work with the kids and take them like camping or cottage or whatever, and wherever you go, on going there and while you're there, you still pray and all that, so they learn that.
That's right.
So it doesn't matter where you are. You go to Niagara Falls, go in the open area, pray there, and then just go about and
That's
walk
right.
around. So these things, these can instill in them the responsibilities. Most of the families that I see, when they go out, they forget all that.
They forget it.
But that's the issue for and if you're going, we went to the East Coast on a trip, and we planned where we're going to be on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we went to Halifax.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Jamal Badwi's home, and then we went to his mosque and we prayed, and then we went on from there.
That's right.
So, we got a 2-week trip, and then we plan everything.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with going to cottage, camping, whatever. And even in the camping, we pray in the tent, and then we go out and
Right.
do other activities.
You see, so it's these youth who have that background, they're the ones who will be the leaders of Islam. You know, and the more it is known in the community, that way of thinking, that's what we're talking about. That's revival. Because revival is, you're still part of society, you're using modern things, but your principles of Islam is there. That's the Islamic revival. That's tajdeed. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's easier to go to an extreme, lock the door and hide yourself away with your turban and everything, and you know, you're the super Muslim. But you're locked away. So what are you going to do when it's time to come out and eat food? What are you going to do in the society? See? That's when people develop two faces. Inside, he's super Muslim. Right? Outside, he's an everyday Joe. Right? He's a regular guy. Everyday Mo, we'll call him. Right? Any other questions anybody has? No points?
One of the things that happen on more than one occasion is that a Muslim would be praying, or a set of Muslims will be praying, and it's down in itself when somebody becomes Muslim because they want to know, well, what are you doing and why are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And it opens that
That's right. This has a big impact, and especially where you are. In Jamaica, what I was finding in the 80s in Jamaica, to a certain extent now, but especially in the 80s, it was so ripe for Islam that we would travel from between one city and another, and then when it was time for Salat, and it's tropical, so you can just go on the side of the road, and so, you know, people are, you know, so we say, okay, brothers, let's make Salat. So we put our rugs down and we pray. Okay, and when we turn around, there's a crowd standing there. So we say, Ali, give him a talk. Right? So one of the brothers would stand up and, you know, explain Islam. And all the time, people were taking Shahada. They were taking Shahada, man. Right on the spot. Now the problem was how to keep them in Islam, right? But they would take Shahada because they were impressed by what we were doing. And we explained it to them, right? And, you know, so depending upon where you are, it's also, you have an influence on society. You know, when you can be part of the society. And you'll be surprised the impact you have on your colleagues at work, also students in the school. I can remember even, you know, my own daughters, it happened, and other young girls, they used to go to Oakwood Collegiate, and they wore their hijabs in Oakwood Collegiate. This is back in the 90s. And there, people come to me and say they're Muslim now, and I didn't know them. They said, but you know, I used to look at your daughters at school, man. You know, and just by looking at them and how they acted, you know, he later on thought about Islam. So what they did, right, was an example of Islam for this person. They planted the seeds, and the person eventually became Muslim, because it's not in our hands anyway, right? So there's a lot of benefits in Islamic revival, not only for the Muslims themselves, but also for society, because this is the best form of da'wah. It's the best form of the spread of Islam. And that's how Islam spread, through character. Merchants, pious people, not conquering armies. That's propaganda. Conquering armies were there for the warfare. When the state is attacked, when people are attacked, you got to fight. That's not to spread Islam. Islam cannot spread by the sword. And this character shows us how important it actually is. So we're going to close here now with this, and inshallah we will continue on next week. And we see how important all these areas are. This is an example for us, for our families. These are important workshop areas for our community. So we'll continue on with the 40 hadith next week, inshallah. Have a safe journey home. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.